The scary truth about the laughing plague. When I stepped off the shuttle at Bishop's Vale, the air had the brittle clarity of a place that had forgotten laughter. You could taste the cold, thin and metallic, like biting a coin. The town sat cupped in a horseshoe of bare hills and firs, a jaw of trees that closed over the valley as the light slipped away. I had expected sirens, quarantine tape, maybe the military. Instead, there was an old primary school with its windows taped in a crosshatch of brown packing tape, a handwritten sign on the door, temporary clinic, and a woman with a thermos waiting on the steps. "You're late," she said, and thrust the thermos into my hands as if punctuality were a vaccine. "I'm early for what matters," I said. My breath made white moths in the dusk. I was a field epidemiologist, sent by the state because someone, somewhere, had named it a plague, and the word plague forces the hand of bureaucracy like little else. She laughed, a short sound with a hard stop. No echo, no linger. "I'm Henley, nurse night shift, call me Henley, everyone does." Her eyes flicked over my shoulder at the empty road. "No more arrivals?" "Just me," I said, and shouldered my bag. "Where are the others?" "Inside." She gestured to the taped windows where faded cutout suns and crooked stick-figure smiles peered between strips of brown. "Sleeping or trying to. We've got 7 patients, 3 of us staffing, and a generator that complains whenever you look at it." "What about the Vales Clinic?" "Full. We overflowed here. You'll see." She opened the door and we stepped into a corridor of waxed linoleum that smelled like damp paper and disinfectant. Somewhere a clock ticked with belligerent precision. Children's drawings lined the walls. Crayon fields, crayon houses, 2 big yellow circles for faces. Someone had written Smile Week in bubble letters, and then with a darker pen added, "Cancelled." Henley led me past the rabbit posters and reading charts into the gymnasium, now triage. Cots were lined against the far wall under a sagging basketball hoop. A large fan sat quiet in a corner, and someone had rigged a plastic curtain to divide the space, turning the squeak floor into a maze of humming machines and rustling sheets. The generator grumbled across the yard and pushed a faint vibration through the floor that made my calves itch, the way bass does when you stand too close to a speaker. I had read the brief in the shuttle. Onset was sudden, prodrome of irritability, then giddiness, then within hours, a peal of laughter that went on until the body couldn't bear it. The diaphragm whipping like an animal, tears streaming, oxygen saturations dropping, lips cyanotic. The unlucky ones asphyxiated with smiles petrified by lived electricity. The lucky ones passed out, emerged glassy-eyed and emptied, and started again with the next stimulus. A joke, a cough, a ringtone. No fever, no rashes. Nothing the lab could plate or stain in the sample we'd gotten from a nearby town. A pathogen that felt like a mood. Henley held the curtain for me. A man in his 30s lay on the nearest cot, hands bound loosely to the side rails with strips of sheet. A bottle of saline dripped painfully slowly into his hand. His chest rose in shallow sips, and the corners of his mouth had faint red abrasions, as if someone had tried to erase a smile with vigor. "This is Robinson," Henley said quietly. "3rd day. He's quieter now. Earlier he..." She fluttered her fingers, an imitation of laughter that felt like a flinch. "We sedate, but it doesn't hold long. They laugh under. The muscles remember." "Any changes with benzodiazepines?" I asked. "Less flailing, more wheezing." She checked his monitor. "We're treating like status epilepticus." "But it isn't," I said. "Any known index exposure?" She grimaced. "They all went to the fair 2 weeks ago, the Mirabelle Fun Fair. Pop-up nonsense in the old canning factory lot. They tore it down after the first cluster, but if we're hoping the answer is in a bulldozer footprint, I'm not holding my breath." "How many dead?" "6 confirmed." Henley looked at the man's mouth. "They die smiling. It makes people talk. You know how people are." An old intercom speaker on the wall croaked with a small burst of static, and we both looked. Nothing, just the weak hum of the fluorescent light. My skin prickled anyway. "We think it's airborne?" Henley asked. "We think everything is airborne until proven otherwise." I tried to make it sound like a joke, and we both pretended to smile. "Have there been auditory triggers? Any music or recorded laughter?" "Not here. We banned screens. But there was this." She tilted her head, listening to a memory. "When the first patient came in, he said he couldn't stop hearing it, even when none of us could. He said it was like the speakers were in the walls." The intercom hissed again, long enough this time that my shoulders tightened. A child's giggle should have followed. It didn't. The hiss faded like a held breath let go. "We disconnected that thing," Henley said, frowning up at it. "Swear we did. We did the rounds. I took notes, listened to lungs that wheezed in triplet rhythms, watched eyelids flutter under a sedative like goldfish under a thin layer of ice." One teenage girl smiled sloppily in her sleep, and the sound it made, wet lips unsticking, was obscene in the quiet. I unpacked my sampler, swabbed cheeks and teeth and the back of throats. Saliva slid over the paired swabs, slick as sorrow. No lesions, no swelling. The mouths themselves were too normal. I thought of the word rictus and wished I hadn't. The last thing I needed was a word like that sitting up front in my head, ready to shape what I saw. When I finally set my bag down in the principal's office, now my office, a faint sweetness hung in the air, as if someone had opened a jar of honey months ago and closed it again imperfectly. I flicked the light on and off twice before it steadied, buzzing like an insect. The walls held photographs of children in costumes, grinning beside a woman in a paper crown. The woman's smile was all teeth and gums and relief. I touched the glass of the frame with a forefinger and felt the ghost of a fingerprint there already, someone else's oil. I wiped it on my pants. Henley stuck her head in. "Coffee, and the generator's sulking again? You want a tour of our luxuries?" "In a minute," I said. "Tell me about the first one, the absolute first." "That was a month ago." She stepped inside, lowering her voice as if the photographs might gossip. "A boy in year 6. His mum said he started giggling during recorded lesson. She told him to stop. He couldn't. She thought he was being cheeky. He laughed until he threw up." Henley's mouth tightened. "We thought drugs, we thought TikTok stupidity. Then his dad started. 2 days later, the neighbor. And all went to the fun fair. Everyone did. Nothing else to do here." "What did it have?" "The usual. Rides, a clown show. They brought a laugh box, a machine, canned laughter for the acts to make the sad funnier. Mr. Cheer, they called the clown. Hideous, bloody thing. Shut him down now, thank God." Something moved in the corner of my eye. A flicker, like a moth. I turned. Nothing, only the school's trophy cabinet, glass dulled with dust, a football frozen in mid-kick. The light's buzz hit a new pitch for a second, thin and high, and stopped. The silence after was too sudden. Henley rubbed her forearms briskly. "It's colder in here than it should be," she said. "You'll get used to it." I nodded and didn't say that I wouldn't. The first night, I did the sensible things. I logged specimens, set up the small PCR machine on the principal's old desk, fed it controls like a priest feeding a god. No hits. I ran them again. Negative. I typed up clinical features, italicized words like inappropriate and incongruent, words we use when behavior refuses to kneel in the church of symptom. I ran the audio recorder on my phone and sampled the ambient room tone, habit for me. You hear a thing differently when it's played back at you. The recording played back a smear of air, my own small movements, and once a barely there creak like a shoe on wood. But I hadn't moved. I glanced at the ceiling. Old fluorescent tubes in the grid sat like bone. The vent in the corner wore a fur collar of dust. I found a chair and, against the protest of my lower back, dragged it under the vent and climbed up. Warm air brushed my face, not moving, and yet, there, a draft that came and went, as if the building were breathing around me. "We banned screens," Henley had said. But I needed a map of the town and a context, so I took my phone into the hall, away from the patients. The school's internet was dead. The cell network had been reduced to emergency services. It didn't matter. I had downloaded the Vale Gazette before arriving. All the little local stories that people who live there think of as nothing, and people like me, whose business is patterns, think of as everything. Mirabelle Funfair returns to Bishop's Vale. The headline had a picture of a striped tent and a ribbon of children, mouths open, hands up like jets. Mr. Cheer's face was a white moon with a red smile that climbed and climbed. Another piece further down, Old Canning Factory hosts Summer Fest. Another, Local radio resurrects vintage laugh track archives. I followed that one. The article's photo showed a man wearing headphones in front of a reel-to-reel, proud as a new father. The caption mentioned an archive found in the old Whitty & Kay Canning Factory, a cache of vintage sound effects bought for pennies from a defunct radio company. There was a mention of laughter, tape labeled simply "Laugh Best Of." The date on the piece was 3 days before the first case. My pen tapped the screen without me telling it to. Tick, tick, tick. Something crawled through the intercom again, a tiny static that tugged at the edge of perception like a child tugging a sleeve. It occurred to me that static is simply too many voices all at once, none strong enough to win. I turned the intercom's volume to 0. It didn't have power anyway. Still, the hairs along my elbows didn't smooth down. Past midnight, I took a walk. To call it fresh air would be an insult. The outside smelled like bark and damp clay in the middle of a church between services. The town had gone to ground. No music rose from any house, no argument, no drunken laughter. The Vale had put itself under a blanket and held its breath. I stood at the edge of the old playground and watched the fog grow like mold across the field. On the far side of the yard, a shape moved. A child, small and sloped, moved under the shadow of the hoofball goals. I called out, "Careful." The shape stopped, then jerked violently 3 times, shoulders punching the air, head snapping back, chest heaving, laughter movements, except there was no sound. The child vanished into the fog like someone had erased the sketch with a damp thumb. I went back inside faster than I would admit. In the gym, Henley sat with her feet on a milk crate, elbows on knees. "Hear it?" she said, without looking up. "Sometimes it laughs without noise. I think of it like, I don't know, like when dogs bark at the frequency fence." "Who laughs?" "All of them," she said, "or the thing that wants them to." "Don't anthropomorphize our unknown," I said, and realized I had glued the smile into my voice the way you do around a frightened person. "Too late," Henley said. She rubbed the heel of her hand against her sternum, once like a slow cough she didn't commit to. "Go sleep. Your turn to sit is at 4. On my second day, a boy named Timo, 12, woke with laughter that had no engine. He laughed like a dry hinge opens, and the sound came in arrhythmic barks, then squeals, then something like sobbing. He tried to put his hands over his mouth, but he had been restrained by a prudent nurse, and the gesture became an impotent loop. Lift, halt, drop. His eyes looked to me, and there was a plea in them. Fix my air. His O2 saturation, which had rested at a tender 92, dropped to 86. We pushed oxygen with a cannula. The laughter slapped at it. I injected lorazepam. His eyes clouded, and he kept laughing, body remembering even as the mind sank. I thought of those chickens who dance after a beheading, some program in the meat that refuses to quit. "Stop," I said. "Useless. Child's wish," and glanced at the intercom as it poured static into the room again, then faded. As the hiss died, Timo's laugh hit its highest pitch yet, a keening note that made my molars ache behind my lips, like I'd bitten foil by accident. I tasted metal. Henley flinched, swore, and clapped her hands over her ears. I did the same. It didn't help. I felt the laugh through bone. Then the power hiccuped. The fluorescence went black, flared, stuttered, caught. For the fraction of the black, Timo's laugh stopped. The silence was a pressure change in the lungs. Then the lights were back and he was laughing again, desperate as a saw. "Did you?" Henley began, but I knew what she had heard. The silence heard it. Later, when he slept, when the laughter had spent itself against chemical mercy, I took my recorder to the intercom and sampled its hiss for 1 minute exactly. I wanted to see the waveforms. Sometimes a visual convinces a brain that refuses through sound. Back in the office, I ran the recording through my laptop, watched the waveform jump like a topography of a stormy coast. I isolated a segment I thought held more than noise and looped it, slowed it down to half speed. There was a laugh in it, yes, but not a whole one, not a person's. It was the middle slice of a laugh, extracted, missing the intake and the decay, a slab of mirth like muscle cut from bone. I found a second segment, and the same thing. A fragment that, when looped, played like a mouth without a face trying phrases on in a mirror. I layered the 2 fragments together. The sound made the belly of my stomach shudder. A chair creaked in the hall, and I jumped hard enough to bite my tongue. I printed the waveforms and pinned them to the board with push pins that still smelled faintly of kindergarten, fruit and talcum and something like dry chalk. I felt foolish and also righteous. This is what we do when an unknown throws its shadow. We try to make an outline we can show to someone else. When I went back into the gym, I held my breath out of habit. The laughter had left the room like heat can leave, slowly, reluctantly, snagging on edges. Henley sat by the boy's bed. He dreamed of the fair, she said. He said he could smell popcorn. He started smiling in his sleep, and I wanted to shake him awake, and I didn't. Some nurse I am. You're the one who's here, I said. That's enough, she grimaced. Says the hero scientist. Oh, I left my cape on the bus, I said, and she snorted, and the sound slid into a half-formed chuckle in the rafters that was not hers and not mine. We froze. The chuckle did not finish itself. It hung like a comma. There is nothing more sinister than laughter interrupted. On the third day, I went to the old canning factory. Wit K had closed in the late 80s, leaving behind a cube of brick with windows punched out like missing teeth. The Mirabelle Fun Fair had set up their own smiling maw in the lot. Stripped now, the tents gone, the ground tracked with heavy tires. Someone had cordoned off a corner with police tape. A sign lay in the dirt, face down. I flipped it with my foot. Mr. Cheer Live, Laugh Box. A cartoon clown with bright eyes and a red smile that made a U shape deep enough to drown in. Somebody had scrawled no more across the clown's face with a marker that had bled into the paper fibers like ink into skin. Inside the factory, it was all the right cliches. The smell of old grease, the sharp tang of mouse, graffiti that didn't make sense and should have but didn't. My headlamp cut a narrow tunnel out of the dim, and I walked in it like a miner, careful of glass. The main floor was a shallow bowl where machines had once squatted like good cows. Now they were gone, leaving scuffed circles and the occasional anchor bolt like a broken tooth. I found the radio room in the back, a small office with a ribbon of soundproofing foam still clinging to one wall like a geologic layer marking the extinction of joy. On a table sat a reel-to-reel machine as proud as the photo in the Gazette, one reel empty, one loaded. The loaded one wore a strip of masking tape across its side, and someone had written Laugh, Master, in neat block letters. I stood there longer than necessary. If this were a film, this would be the scene where the audience told me not to push play. I'm not an idiot. I didn't push play. But I did lean closer. The way you lean closer to a snake behind glass, you know cannot hurt you. The reel was dusty, and yet there were finger smears on the dust, finger arcs, someone's unstable curiosity recorded in oil. The room's silence had weight. When I shifted my stance, a floorboard cracked and the sound shot like a flare. A whisper fluttered through the ceiling vent. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself the room wasn't breathing. On the desk, a notebook. I opened it. Dates. A list of tracks. Applause 2, booing, light, laugh, family, laugh, odd extra, laugh, track 7. Beside laugh track 7, someone had drawn a crude smile. Inside the curve of it, an even smaller curve. A smile inside a smile. I left the reel alone. I took photographs. I recorded room tone. I turned to go, and in the slit of my light, a shape moved across the far wall. Something thin and long like the shadow of an arm swinging. My throat closed and reopened with an audible click. I told myself, pipes. I told myself, rats. But the shadow had the swing of human rhythm, and it did not skitter. I stepped into the hall. A second shape crossed my light, low to the ground. Laughter came from somewhere deep in the building then, wet and slow and private, like the laugh you use when you find something under your tongue. "Who's there?" I asked, and wanted to reach into the air and grab the words back. My voice belonged to someone who did not understand the maths of calling and response. The laugh answered me by continuing without acknowledging I had spoken. That was worse. I backed away, light jittering across peeling posters on the walls. Safety protocols, dietary fiber, a cartoon kidney smiling too hard. When the main floor opened in front of me like a mouth, the laugh stopped. The absence rang. On my way out, the police tape caught on my sleeve and made a noise like ripping skin. My heart sprinted. I drove the borrowed truck back faster than the road deserved. Back at the school, Henley had tied her hair up and looked 10 years older. "Where were you?" she demanded, then saw my face and asked more gently. "What did you hear?" "Nothing," I said, which was true if you defined nothing as a laugh you couldn't fit inside of language. "Right." She rubbed her sternum again with that single frowning circle. "Well, this one tried to leave." She jerked her head at one of the cots. The occupant, a woman in her 40s with the seraphic face of someone who had managed to smile in photographs for 20 years without meaning it, stared at the ceiling with eyes like paper cuts. She said she could just outrun it. Outrun what? Henley lifted her shoulders and let them down. See, we're anthropomorphizing again. Let me make a leap, I said, too tired to be careful. What if it isn't a pathogen like we like to imagine? What if the vector is patterned sound and the host needs breath? What if it uses the diaphragm the way a stomach bug uses the colon, takes over the muscle, forces a behavior, increases spread? Laughter is an aerosol cannon if you think about it. Henley looked at me like she wanted to argue. Then she didn't. But then why the silent laughs? Practice, I said. A rehearsal. Or, I hesitated, or the body keeps trying even when the thing that calls laughter isn't feeding, like a heart muscle that continues a rhythm after the pulse that made it. Then what do? She said it like a demand and like a plea. We starve it. We break its pattern. We keep them from hearing more. We make silence and we make the wrong noise. I heard how that sounded. Henley did too. White noise, I added, making it sound less like a spell. Interference. You'll love our generator then, she said. Nothing interferes like that piece of... She caught herself, glanced at a sleeping patient as if the word shit might wake them, and let it ride. That night, I made a mistake. It was late. The gym's lights dimmed in that municipal way that suggests an algorithm basing brightness on a budget line. Henley had gone to the cafeteria to try the machine that made tea taste like the bag it came in. I sat in the office with my laptop and the laugh master waveforms I had photographed, overlaying them with the fragments from the intercom, watching the patterns hide inside each other like nesting dolls. There was a knock at the door, soft twice. My chest went cold and then warm. I opened the door on reflex, a polite creature, and there in the corridor stood Timo, barefoot, grinning. Hey, I said carefully, you should be in bed. He kept grinning. It changed the whole geometry of his face. Behind the grin, his eyes were wrong, overbright and swimming. Timo, I said, where's Henley? He lifted his hands, which were free. Henley must have untied him when he slept, and made a little shrug like he'd forgotten there were words for things. Then he laughed. No sound came out. The laugh racked his body in 3 hard jerks, and with the third jerk, something like dust puffed from his mouth. It glittered in my headlamp beam, slow falling, like the confetti you use at funerals when no one wants to sweep. Back to bed, I said, voice gone gentle and high, the way you speak to a knife. Come on, I'll walk with you. He shook his head. He stepped toward me. A seam opened in the grin, and I saw the plank of his tongue move as if he were swallowing something, then pushing it back up, the way a cat does with a hairball. I swallowed reflexively, throat tightening to a bead. The intercom breathed static. I held my breath. Timo's grin trembled. His shoulders jerked again, 1, 2, 3, hard enough that his teeth clicked. I stepped aside, and he staggered past me into the office, eyes on my laptop, where a laugh's waveform lay like a sleeping serpent across the screen. He made a small, eager noise low in his throat, and the sound had an appetite in it. He reached toward the computer. I slammed the lid down, and the sound the laptop made was a flat clap of uninterested plastic. Timo flinched backward as if I had struck him. The intercom made a noise like a gasp. Timo's grin fled, and he looked around, disoriented, then folded like a paper crane and dropped. I caught as much of him as I could, knees bracing, and we swayed for a moment in that ridiculous dance of collapsing and catching and trying to be 2 bodies and 1 stability. His breath stuttered against my shirt. He smiled again in that slack, sleepy way, and I hated it in a way that scored the inside of my ribs. Henley arrived at a run, tea slopping onto her hand. "Oh, you idiot," she said. To herself or to me, it wasn't clear, and she looked at the laptop like it was a knife left on a playground. "We can't have those things here." I should have said clearer. "I know," I said. I know. You don't, she said, but she wasn't cruel about it. Together we hauled Timo back to bed, tied the strips of sheet again with hands that shook, and promised each other we would not tell the others. Telling the others would make it more solid, and some things were better left gelatinous. Tomorrow, I said, breathless. Tomorrow we try interference, and I go back to the factory. You're going back there? Her voice tripped. Why? Because that's where it's loudest, I said. The honest part. And because I think that thing wants to be heard, and you learn a predator by listening to how it wants to be seen. Fine, she said. And I'll build your noises. I used to DJ, you know. Before I learned people bleed in interesting ways. I can make a sound that ruins a mood. There's a talent, I said. She huffed a laugh that died at birth, like a bird that forgot to open its beak. In the morning, I took from the supply closet an old magnet, the kind used in elementary school science lessons. Red paint flaking off, one end marked N. I slipped it into my pocket. I also took an ancient tape recorder from the principal's office. Who keeps a tape recorder in the 2020s? And I told myself I was being thorough, not primitive. I told myself a tape recorder was best for tape. The factory waited with its mouth cracked open. The fog had lifted, and the air had that too big feeling after fog, when everything seems farther away because the edges have returned. Inside the radio room, dust motes swam like sea life in the shaft of my lamp. The reel-to-reel sat obedient. The one labeled master looked patient. I put on latex gloves, felt them snap at my wrists, the sound like a quiet threat, and I lifted the reel from its spindle and placed it on the desk. The tape was taut. I took the tape recorder out and set it beside, a little brown plastic animal that had stared down hundreds of teachers scolding it to rewind. This is a bad idea, I told myself out loud. My voice was calmer than the rest of me. I threaded the tape recorder with a blank cassette. I did not press record. I did not press play. I did not touch the reel-to-reel. I took photographs instead, angles and close-ups, like a burglar of truth. This time, the laugh started in the hallway. It was a small sound, almost bashful, and it grew, the way wind does when you don't notice it at first. It had a texture like something wet dragged over rough stone. The light in the hall changed, a flutter, a blink, and in the blink a shadow passed the doorway across the gap of light, taller than a person, edges soft like cloth. My scalp went so tight I thought hair would come out. I put my hand on the tape recorder as if a talisman. No, I said. To the recorder or the laugh or myself. No, I won't. The laugh came into the room. There is no other way to explain it. It entered like a person does. First the sound, then the sense of someone in the same air as you, then the weight of that, the way space rearranges around intent. It was behind me, then beside me, then the ceiling vent sighed, and I felt warm air on my face that smelled faintly sweet, like the office. The laugh pressed to my ear without touching, intimate as a whisper you do not want. Stop, I said. I held the magnet in my right hand. Stop, or I'll erase you. I felt ridiculous. I felt like a priest threatening a hailstorm with incense. The laugh rose and dropped, an undulation, like breathing. It wanted a mouth. That's what occurred to me then, insane and true. It wanted breath, and mine was as good as any. It wanted to sit behind my face and wear my lungs like an old coat. I didn't breathe. I let my lungs go cold and small. The laugh reacted as if I had slapped it, drew back, then surged, angry. The tape on the reel shivered on the spindle in a way that had nothing to do with air currents. I brought the magnet up to the reel, not touching but near. The laugh shuddered again, a strange bass note creeping under it like a warning. I moved the magnet closer. The tape on the reel lifted itself a fraction, like hair-raising, then lay down. Back off, I breathed, and realized my mistake. The laugh poured into my mouth. That is what it felt like water poured down the wrong pipe, like a bee entering soft fruit. My diaphragm seized in a practiced jerk. My mouth stretched, and something vast and patient tried to fit itself into a smaller space. I gagged, and still my body prepared for mirth. Muscles I do not tell to do anything began. 1, 2, 3. Not a laugh, not yet, but the machinery priming. My vision sparkled at the edges. I shoved the magnet against the tape, hard. The reel shivered, and the laugh screamed. That is the only word I have for it. The laugh screamed. It tore out of my throat like a sob in reverse. The room felt colder in an instant, the way caverns do when a bat leaves. The reel's tape curled at the edges, the recorded oxide scuffed and dancing. I kept the magnet there, slow circles, as if erasing a chalkboard letter by letter. My hand shook. Sweat ran down my ribs. The sweet smell intensified, a honeyed rot. I pressed the tape recorder's record button with my other hand without meaning to. My thumb had its own plan. The red light winked on, small and eager. The screaming laugh, scrambling to escape the magnet, jumped. I felt it like static when you touch a doorknob. It leaped to the recorder, slid down the head, nestled. The tape spooled. The red light blinked like a pleased eye. No, I said again, and this time I meant it like a contract. I wrenched the recorder open, tore the cassette out, yanked the long brown tongue of tape free, and then, in a small, ungraceful fury, I chewed. The oxide tasted bitter and foreign, and I spat it onto the floor like poison. I wrapped the ruined loop around the magnet. The laugh went thin and dim like a radio station slipping away with distance. Silence fell. Not the silence of peace. The silence of something that had left and left part of itself lodged inside you, like a splinter you do not find until it festers. I went to my knees and vomited. Golden threads hung from my mouth, and I thought of confetti and wanted to laugh and didn't. I crawled to the desk, took the laugh, master reel in both hands, and broke it. The plastic warped, cracked, gave. The tape spilled like a ribbon of oil. I wrapped the tape around the magnet too, a grotesque gift, a snake coiled on a red stick. When I looked up, someone stood in the doorway. It was Henley. Her hair was down and her cheeks flushed, breath fast. "Are you insane?" she asked, voice too loud. It echoed along the bones of the room and came back thin. "The patients, something happened. They all started at once. The intercom went." She made an inarticulate gesture. "I couldn't shut it up. What did you do?" "I starved it," I said, which was the bravest sentence I have ever said and also a lie. "Help me. We have to get rid of this." "Rid of what?" I held up the magnet, the tape terribly festive around it. She made a face like I had offered her a dead animal and took it anyway. "Where?" "Burn it." The word felt like an old friend. We took it behind the school, into the place where the PE teacher must once have smoked and hidden the evidence with uncollected leaves. We built a stack of broken rulers and cardboard. Henley lit it with one of those unholy clicky lighters hospitals aren't supposed to have. The fire stuttered and then bit into the wood. The tape shrank, wrinkled, turned, in moments, into a foul, cloying smoke that hung low and did not want to leave. The sweet smell multiplied, a party and a rot. We stood back. We did not breathe as much as we could help. Henley pressed her fist to her sternum again, quietly, not looking at me. In the light of the fire, the lines at the corners of her mouth were deeper. She looked like someone who no longer knew how to laugh without wincing. When the fire was ash and two ugly, bent spindles of plastic, we smashed them with a shovel until they looked like nothing that had ever been desirable. "Now what?" Henley asked, voice hoarse. "Now we go inside," I said, and did not say, "Now we see if we killed an animal or stirred a nest." What followed would make a heroic montage in a different story. It was not heroic, it was work. Henley built noise. She scavenged speakers from the music room, the kind with stickers on them, one shaped like a star, one like a smiling note. She strung cables across the gym like vines. She generated white noise, pink noise, a waterfall of static that fell around the beds like bad rain. The intercom tried to argue, hissed and gurgled. Henley smothered it in snow. I built silence. I sealed vents with painter's tape and towels, stuffed the intercom's mouth with gauze like a wound. I taught the parents and wives how to hold their breath for counts of 10, 20, 30, not to starve themselves, but to feel control of their lungs again, to remember that breath belonged to them. We banned jokes. We banned smiles as best we could without banning kindness. We spoke in low, even voices that hung in the static like flags that didn't care which way the wind blew. The patients' laughs grew shorter. Some stopped mid-run, like a dancer losing the beat. Timo's body learned to unlearn. He began to breathe with the caution of someone stepping from stone to stone over a ravine. We gave him a metronome to hold, a physical rhythm to lean on, and he moved the arm back and forth like a striker hitting a bell. His chuckles dwindled to flinches. He slept without the smile tearing new cuts into his face. But I didn't tell Henley about the new thing. That when I sat alone in the office and let my jaw slacken, A small, private laughter rose in my throat like a bubble from depths. It made no sound. It was the idea of a laugh. When I caught it, it shrank like an animal under a hat. On the fifth night, the Vale did something reckless. They held a vigil in the town square. People brought candles. They stood apart the way we do now, measuring ourselves by arm spans and fear. They sang a church song without music and without a choir. It was ragged and defiant and almost beautiful. I wanted to hate them for the risk, and I couldn't. We opened the school windows and let the music come in. Halfway through the second verse, the intercom found power. It crackled, high and animal. The static surged against Henley's white noise, and for a moment the two sounds made a new sound that didn't know its parents. The intercom spit words, syllables, nonsense. Then a laugh. Not a fragment this time, a whole thing, a laugh as big as a house. It moved under the song like a shark under swimmers. The patient stirred. Timo's metronome faltered. Robinson's eyelids fluttered. The woman with the seraphic face smiled like the face of a saint in a painting that makes you avoid her eyes. "No," Henley said sharply to the room, as if the room were a dog. "No." I went to the intercom and peeled the tape and stuffed more gauze and slapped my palm over the grill the way you do a mouth that won't stop. It vibrated under my hand, hummingbird fast. It laughed. I felt it in my bones, the small private laugh behind my sternum rising to answer like call and response. "Don't you?" I said to my chest. "Don't what?" "Don't answer," I said. I understood then something precise and awful. It needed resonance. It needed its laugh to meet the laugh in someone else. That is how joy is supposed to work, isn't it? Laughter is a contagion we bless in ordinary times. What a clever thief to use what we call good. I did something then that I will not defend. I climbed onto the cafeteria table and addressed the patients as if they were a classroom. "Listen to me," I said, loud enough that it cut across both the intercom and Henley's storm. "Do not laugh. If it lifts your chest, hold it down. If it tickles your throat, swallow it. It is not yours. Keep your air." Henley shot me a look so sharp I almost bled. "You don't talk to people that way," she said. "I'm not," I said. "I'm talking to the thing that wants to use them." As if to prove me right, the intercom raised its pitch. It became hysterical. The laughter moved into that dangerous territory where a laugh sounds like a cry and a cry sounds like a laugh. The patients writhed. Timo lost count with the metronome and his body jerked. 1, 2, 3. I ran. I ran to the utility closet where the breaker box sat like a gray heart. The generator would scream if I did what I meant to do. The ventilators would throw their tantrum. Part of me was already writing the report in the litigation. Another part, the animal part, the one that sleeps in the spine, had decided. I grabbed the mane and pulled. The clinic's world fell to dark. The white noise died. The intercom died. The vigil outside went on, absurdly, like a dream from a better story. Inside the black, I heard 7 truncated laughs become breaths. It happened in a sequence, like dominoes. A gulp, a cough, a sob, this time the right way. Henley's voice, hot with fury. "Turn it." "Wait," I said. The words slipped across the dark like a flat stone. "Listen." We listened. We heard breathing. I flipped the breaker and the clinic rose from the dark like a shaken aquarium. The generator spun its grievance, then settled. The white noise returned. The intercom gagged, sulked. Henley stared at me, eyes bright in a face that didn't have room for more lines. "Don't," she said on principle. "Just don't do that again without warning." "I won't," I said and meant, "I will if I must." After, we sat on the back steps where we had burned the tapes. Ash made small gray islands in the dirt. The vigil had dwindled to murmurs and the occasional cough that made both of us jerk as if someone had fired a gun. Henley lit a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have and took one drag and said, "I don't even smoke," and put it out. "Does it ever go away?" she asked. "The feeling that your own laugh doesn't belong to you?" "No," I said, because I was honest and because I could feel it at the base of my throat, a small, patient ripple like a creature under ice. "But you learn its moves. When you leave," she said, "you'll take it with you." I didn't answer. We sent off samples to bigger labs with bigger toys. We wrote our reports in words that looked crisp and scientific and hid the parts with the night. The Vale reopened its shops with signs that said "masks encouraged" and "please." No jokes that were meant to be a joke. The funfair didn't come back. The factory was bricked up, not destroyed. The town never destroys anything. We put the intercom in the dumpster behind the school, and I poured a jug of salt over it, an old superstition in a place that manufactured new ones. In the last week of my stay, Timo made me a paper crown in art therapy and called me King of Silence. It made me laugh, genuinely, and then I had to walk outside and breathe air and remind the thing in my throat that this one belonged to me. On my last night, I returned the borrowed truck to the municipal garage. The attendant took the keys in a gloved hand and said, "We're grateful," as if gratitude were another form you had to fill and sign. Back in my motel room, the kind with 2 paintings of fruit and a window that pretends it can keep out road noise, I sat on the bed and let the day's damp leak out of me. The TV had been unplugged by the housekeeper. They were careful here. I left it that way. I used my laptop without sound, like a monk writing letters. I opened my recorder app to clear its backlog of ambient nonsense, saw a file I didn't remember. Office room tone 2. My gut flipped. I had recorded only 1 office tone, not 2. I put the cursor on the file. I did not press play. I watched the seconds count. 0, 0, 0. The file was empty. I breathed out long and felt foolish for the sweat blooming under my arms. I closed the laptop. In the new quiet. Nope, not new. I corrected myself. The room had been quiet all along. I heard it, the tiny movement under the breath, the almost laugh. In me. I went to the mirror. I nodded. My reflection nodded back. I smiled. My reflection smiled. I let the smile go slack and waited for it to linger, to make its own decision. It did not. It was me. Still in bed with the lights off, I held my breath to 10, 20, 30. I listened to the room's white, its ceiling fan hush, its refrigerator knock, the soft whine of someone's car moving across the river road. My diaphragm gave a curious little tug, a dog testing a leash. I did not laugh. It subsided, wary. "Here's the truth about your plague," I said into the dark, to the thing if it listened, and to myself if I was the only ears. "You are not divine. You are not a joke. You are a parasite that wears joy to get in the house. We are not your house." The dark didn't answer. It never does. I slept. In the morning I drove out of Bishop's Vale with the hills opening their teeth to let me go. At the edge of town, a new sign someone had made by hand, "Thank you," painted in careful block letters. Beside it, someone had drawn a smile, and then someone else had crossed it out with a black X, and then someone else had drawn a smaller smile in the crook of the X. I laughed, once, low in mine. Something laughed back deep inside me, smaller, patient. Fine, I thought. Live there if you must. Learn my steps. I'll learn yours. We will share the same lungs and see who gets tired first. Months later, when I briefed the department in a room that smelled like coffee and ambition, I called it patterned laughter syndrome, and I talked about resonance, exposure events, and mitigation strategies. I did not talk about the factory's breath, or the thing that poured into my mouth like water, or Henley's knuckles whitening around a magnet wrapped in torn tape. Those details belong to the kind of truth no one funds and everyone needs. The question everyone asked, in one form or another, was, "Is it over?" And the answer, in one form or another, was, "No plague is ever over." They wait, clever as foxes, for you to forget the shape of their shadow. The laughing one waits in playlists and old reels, in our cleverness, in our need to fill a quiet with something that feels like each other. It waits inside us too, now, small, learning. Some nights, far from Bishop's Vale, I find myself awake and listening for it. The room holds its breath with me. The radiator hisses the way radiators do everywhere, like a warning and a lullaby. I swallow a laugh that isn't mine, and it goes down like a stone to a well, and waits. I count to 30, and the laughter counts with me. When I finally sleep, I dream of a chalkboard with a smile drawn in white, and a hand, careful and slow, erasing it curve by curve. I wake with chalk on my fingers, and in the mirror, for a second before I recognize myself, something looks back with my eyes and a mouth that knows all the shapes of joy. It does not laugh, and neither do I.